Hey everyone, Shadowstrider here, and in today's video we will talk about the elemental debuffs after the new patch 0.4.4 released. As you all know, some changes happened. I decided to do a fair bit of testing and share the results with you. Since the patch has hit, however, I have done multiple solo and team kills, and I have noticed that rarely you get the elemental debuffs applied to Behemoths. This made me do a couple of tests to see what the real situation is, how many hits it really takes, do they change depending on Behemoth tiers, do they change with weapons and other changes. If you're interested in what I found out, then stick with the rest of this video. As you all well know, elemental damage was changed to apply its debuffs based on number of hits rather than on a damage threshold. When I first heard this, I was highly optimistic towards it, since I'm a Mandy sword user. The sword is in the middle between slow and fast weapons, and I was thinking that it would be in a sweet spot for applying the debuffs. Well, I was partially correct. Firstly, I was not able to prove for sure whether the number of hits required to apply the elemental debuffs reset when a behemoth flees away. I'm inclined to believe they do not, but I'm positive that the number of required hits to apply a debuff increase after each successful application, similar to how stagger damage works. There's also a difference between the number of hits required for each elemental type. My first test with the Bloodfire sword proved this. It took me around 55 hits in order to apply a blaze debuff on Skarn over the course of 45 seconds. And the second application took me around 106 hits to be applied a little 1 minute again. My second test was with a Bloodfire axe, and I was unable to apply a debuff at all. He took around 198 hits from my axe plus minus 1 or 2, and he did not get a single blaze debuff. The fight lasted for 7 minutes without traveling to get to him. He did escape once during the fight, and that was after I had 115 hits done to him. This got me interested whether it was the difference in weapon that mattered or the difference in timing the attacks. My third test was with a Stormclaw sword. It took me 25 hits to apply the shock debuff, and until the end of the fight I was able to apply 3 times, summing up to a total of 4 shock debuffs. After the first application, it took a little above 2 times more hits to apply the second debuff. Second debuff took me 52 hits to be applied, the third one took me 75 hits to be applied, and the fourth one again took me 75 hits to be applied. My fourth test was with the Shockjaw axe. It took me 32 hits to apply the shock debuff for the first time. The second one took me 70 hits to apply, and I can't before being able to apply a third one, unfortunately. My fifth test was with an Izaga hammer. I did 120 hits on him, and I did not get a single shock debuff. This made me think of two things. First, that in order to apply elemental debuffs, you must stack the number of hits, and there is a cooldown timer which resets them if you have not applied another hit in a given amount of time. The second one was that maybe depending on the weapon type, the amount of hit to change. My next test proved that it is more likely the first rather than the second. My sixth test was again with a Stormclaw sword. I hit him 10 times, afterwards waited for 10 seconds and started hitting him again. After the pause, I hit him 15 times and he received the shock debuff. In order to be sure that it definitely was not related to a hidden cooldown timer, I did a 7th test in which I hit him 5 times, waited for 20 seconds, and then strangely it took me again 25 hits to shock stagger him. This threw me off a bit, but I had another thing on my head. While I was waiting for the 20 seconds to pass, I let him hit me 5 or 6 times. What if the stacks needed to apply the debuff got reduced or negated based on how much times the behemoth has hit you? So I did test number 8, again with Stormclaw sword. Again I hit him 10 times and I backed away to wait for 20 seconds again. This time I evaded all of his attacks, and it took me 25 hits to shock stagger him again. This proved that there was indeed a time period by which you have to stack the attacks. I now knew that it was more than 10 seconds and less than 20 seconds or less, so I decided to do a couple more tests to see how much it actually is. There was also another possibility. Rather than stacking the hits, maybe we were required to land a certain amount of hits in a certain amount of time. Based on the axe and hammer tests, I was presuming it is the second rather than the first. So in test number 9, I used Stormclaw Sword, I hit him 10 times, waited 10 seconds, hit him 10 more times, waited 15 seconds, hit him 14 times and he got staggered. This confirmed my theory that first you have to get a certain amount of hits stacked on him to apply the debuff, and second, each stack expires after a certain amount of time, so technically you need to apply the hit threshold in a given amount of time. That explained why it took me more hits with the Shockjaw axe to apply the debuff and why I never managed to apply it with the Bloodfire axe and the Nizaga hammer. Test number 10, I used Bloodfire Sword again with attack speed bonuses and I was able to apply the debuff on the 50th hit in 30 seconds. This meant that the Blaze debuff takes 50 hits to be applied and Shock 1 takes 25 hits to be applied after your first hit. Just to be sure, in test 11 I used Shockjaw axe again with attack speed buffs and indeed I was able to apply the debuff in 25 hits. What I needed to do now is check how many hits are required to apply the Frost debuff. For test 12 I used a Scry Saber and it took me 25 hits to apply the Frost debuff on him. Now I started wondering whether Blaze took twice as many hits intentionally or for another reason, and in order to check for sure I decided to test all 3 weapons on Gnasher. This way I was also going to check whether each behemoth takes a different amount of hits in order to apply the debuffs. Shock Weapon applied the debuff after 25 hits in less than 30 seconds. Frost Weapon test applied the debuff after 25 hits in less than 30 seconds. Blaze Weapon test applied the debuff after 50 hits in less than 30 seconds. This made me believe that the behemoths most likely scale with each tier rather than individually on how many stacks they need in order to be applied the debuff. Next test was with another player. The result showed that the number of hits required to apply the debuffs are roughly 30% more for each new player in the hunt. Frost and Shock weapons took between 32 and 35 hits to be applied, and Blaze weapon around 63 to 67 from 2 tests. If this follows the formula Dauntless uses for scaling everything else, then that means for each new player the number of hits required to apply the debuff is increased by roughly 30%. What I needed to confirm for last was something obvious. Does the number of hits required change per behemoth or per tier? From Gnasher, Skarn and Quillshot I knew that it does not change if you fight all of them in the Monster's Verge. They all take either 25 hits or 50 hits when soloing them. When I tested Skarn in the Yonder Keys, however, the next tier in the game, he took around 30 hits for the first shock application and around 60 hits for the second one. When I tested Scryf in the Yonder Keys, it took 28 hits for the first application and 63 hits for the second one. When I tested Helion in the Uncharted Reaches, it took me again roughly around 30 hits to apply shock debuff on him for the first application and between 62 and 70 to the second one. When I tested normal Firebrand Charrock in the Maelstrom, I first did around 45 hits in 30 seconds and I did not apply any shock debuff. It however did apply it a bit before he died, which was after a minute and 40 seconds of sustained hits, and it took around 150 hits to achieve it. He died afterwards, so I had no way to test the second debuff. This made me speculate that the time you have to land all the needed hits to apply the elemental debuffs may decrease with the higher tier behemoths, but since I used a lot of attack speed stats and potions on all the tests for the number of hits, I may very well be doing them way too quick in the lower ones. In the Maelstrom and Heroic Maelstrom, the needed hits are definitely a lot more and the time you have to achieve them is definitely smaller. Since the patch update, I have rarely been able to apply the debuffs solo, sometimes I have been applying them in team fights. I will be doing a follow-up video with a couple of guild members to check exactly how long and how much hits the Maelstrom behemoths need to take in order to be down. From the current findings, I think that having a Warpike and Chainblades users in the teams became a lot more viable solely if you need the elemental debuffs to be activated. To summarize everything in a few short words, Applying Shock and Frost debuff using an elemental weapon to a behemoth up to the Maelstrom will require you to hit it between 25 and 30 times in a period of 30 seconds. Applying Blaze debuff using an elemental weapon to a behemoth up to the Maelstrom will require you to hit it between 50 and 60 times in a period of 60 seconds. The number of hits will increase by roughly 30% for each new player in the hunt. The number of hits required for the second application of the debuff is increased by 100%. The number of hits required for the third and fourth application is increased by 50%, and both of them take the same identical number of hits. This, however, does not apply for Maelstrom behemoths since they require further testing. Do not take all of this to heart. I may have small errors along the way, but I'm pretty positive in what I have tested and found out. It is also not hard for you to test it yourself. I did it in order to help everyone and to also better understand it myself. If you have found something else, then please, by all means, share the information with me so that I can update everything. I'm hoping to get some feedback from Dauntless developers on this so that we can together shed some light on how exactly the new system works. This is everything for this video. If you enjoyed it and it helped you, give it a thumbs up. If you want to discuss something, drop me a comment. Share the video as you see fit, and remember to follow me on Twitch and Twitter at the links down below, as well as subscribe to the channel for more video game and music content.